Okay, thank you, Dr. McNeil. We'll see you again in just a moment. I just want to remind everybody that we are recording, so yeah, make sure you don't say anything that you don't want on record. Okay, so how's everybody doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine. Well, I guess we can start with our questions for today then, right? I want to open this one up to all of our panelists. Our first question, what does Juneteenth mean to you?
Any particular order, Mr. Cotton, or should we just
No particular order? Whoever wants to go first can.
dive in? Juneteenth, I think, has numerous meanings, but most essentially for me, it is about memory and possibility. And so, Juneteenth, the concept of it is bound up in remembering, right, the events of our past, remembering how we got to where we are today. But it also is about this future that we share, the possibility of hope in continued and nurtured liberation. And so, Juneteenth for me is that it's an invitation, right, to remember, an invitation to engage with our ancestors' experience in order to inform and catapult us to the shared liberation that we're seeking every single day.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lumumba. Anybody else?
This is John Gilleylen, and Joshua. I'm former chair, which goes along with my age of public policy and administration. So in some circles, they still haven't forgotten, but I don't quite have the responsibility that I used to have. In other words, I'm a little bit more free. Okay. Well, one of the things Joshua is that I looked at the your framing of the holiday, and it's a holiday. It's a holiday. It's when we as Black people celebrate in our own space. Um, It often it is, and we'll get to your in shape of your questions. But I see it really important now, more important than I've ever seen it, and I've seen it in the context of Ralph Ellison's book on the Invisible Man. There's an attempt to whitewash America, to erase our existence in it and what our existence have been. And I see it as an opportunity for us to reconnect our communities, for us to declare our presence and our role as citizens in this country. And I think it's more important than ever, especially in the last 2 years. It's become even more important. I see it as a celebration, and I see it as a necessity.
Dr. Kersen or Ms. Nelson?
Yeah, those were good points for sure. I think someone who looks like me, um, for those of you who look like you're preaching to the choir. I think what Juneteenth does for me is it takes people who look like me, who don't necessarily pay attention to this or actually are hostile to these things, and it makes them face the reality that Black history is our history. Juneteenth is one of the only holidays, as I was looking over the holidays, it's one of the only holidays besides Independence Day that is the independence of a people. And so that was, our country was founded in the assumption that there were some people that were not equal, even though it was kind of contradicting other sections of our founding documents. And so I think, to answer your question, Juneteenth is important for people who maybe not have an appreciation of that history. And then, as other people have mentioned, it is also something to celebrate that in that time in 1865, a formerly enslaved people began the enfranchisement process, and sadly that didn't follow all the way through, and especially in these last two years, as Dr. Gilleylen brought up, there has been a active forgetfulness of some of our history. So Juneteenth and any public event that has some of that memory re-exposed, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Dr. Kersen. Ms. Nelson?
If you're to ask me, I feel like Juneteenth is a celebration of Black freedom, not just then, but also for years to come. So, what Dr. Lumumba said really resonated with me, where it was that it's a celebration of what is possible for our future, because Black freedom doesn't just look like, oh, traditional slavery not being legal anymore. It also looks like not being the very large amount of people in prisons where slavery is pretty much legal, right? So, uh, Juneteenth to me looks like the will to allow that to change as a whole.
Okay. Our next question goes for Dr. Gilleylen. How do events like Juneteenth represent communal empowerment?
What it does is that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to be together on our own terms, celebrate who we are. And Joshua, a lot of our history is undocumented. It's undocumented history. And as a result, a lot of who we are has not been told. And what is being told come through oral histories. There are so many things that happen during Juneteenth week. We come together as a community. We celebrate as a community. And Joshua, is an opportunity for us to deal with a lot of the issues that we constantly face. It's an opportunity for us not to just retell what's happened to us, but it's an opportunity for us to come together and strategize. It's an opportunity for us to plan. It's an opportunity for us to heed the call to action. That call right now is very loud, and we're not sure whether or not this call to action, how effective it's going to be. Some of the successes that we've had in the past have changed. Some of those methodologies may work and may not work, simply because of how we have evolved politically. But Juneteenth is an opportunity for the community to get together. And I'm sure that these conversations, this conversation that we're having today, these things are taking place. So yes, I think it's a communal activity that can bring us together.
Just as a follow-up, what issues do you see us needing to come together on the most right now?
Are you asking me, Joshua? Okay. My greatest concern, I'm going to be quite honest with you, is November 2026. I think that this is an opportunity to put a speed brake, a bumper, on some of the things that we've seen happen to us so quickly. We're in the midst of being totally or severely disenfranchised throughout this country, not just in southern states and not just in red states. This is November 26th is probably one of the most significant. We often hear every election is significant, but nothing is more significant than this one. And the battle lines have already been drawn. The strategies are already in place. The question is going to be, will our community, who have often responded with less lackluster, is whether or not we are in a position to respond right now. respond to this challenge. November 26th, midterm elections. I hope I said that with some passion, Joshua, because I truly believe that. Okay. I hope I answered the question.
I think we all kind of felt that. I guess our next question goes for Dr. Lumumba. Dr. Lumumba, what role does storytelling play in communal healing?
I love that question, Joshua. Thank you. So I am a storyteller. That's how I brand myself, and been privileged enough to build a career around talking to people about stories. And so when we talk about healing, especially for community, storytelling is one of the oldest mechanisms we have for healing. Stories allow us to name the pain. It allows us to imagine the futures, and allows us to talk through our experience. Many of us have therapists, and one of the things that are that's so healing about that sort of space is you get to tell your story, and you get to walk through what you've been through and imagine what comes next. And so, storytelling plays a huge role in communal healing because everyone has a story, and that's one of the connectors to humanity, that there is not a human being living that doesn't have a story about their existence. And so when we start to honor stories, then that's where isolation is replaced with connection. We're able to connect because this is your story, well, I relate to that, or I don't relate to that because this is my story, but we're still sharing our experiences. And when you know the story of another community, when you know the story of another human being, then you are instantly drawn to acknowledging and honoring their humanity. You're drawn to extending dignity to them. It's very difficult to disenfranchise folks whose stories because there will be intersections. We all have experienced pain and love and joy and hardship and all of these things that are embedded, these themes that are embedded in our stories. And so communal healing requires storytelling. When we hush up stories, then we cover up the truth. And when the truth is covered up, then we know that there is no healing that can result from that. When you are physically hurt, right, and you need physical healing, the physicians and the healers that you go to are going to ask you what happened. What's the story behind this injury? And so that is where I see storytelling playing one of the most critical roles. And it's also this sort of ancestral inheritance. It's what we have. Not many of us and not all of us have heirlooms that have been passed down through our family that are tremendously valuable. We don't have jewels and silver and that sort of thing, but we do have our stories. And so those stories not only remind us that our experience matters, the lives that we're living now, but that we have something that has been gifted to us from our ancestors, that their stories demonstrate to us some sort of mechanism for survival because we are here. And so storytelling to me is invaluable. It's something that I pray that we never lose. And I'm not only talking about what's in books. I love literature. I love reading, but I'm also talking about that component of oral storytelling, right? Passing on our memories, passing on our experiences, passing on our values. Much of that in our families and in our communities happen through oral storytelling. What Auntie so-and-so did, who Uncle so-and-so was, where grandma was at this time. And that is how we not only acknowledge the victories that we've won, but we also, again, imagine this shared future that we have. And I love that Deona really spoke to that. That's important to remember, that there is a future and we all share it. And so, when we're talking about conversations and stories about freedom, that's something that we all that intersects with all of our experiences. And it's something that's valuable to all of us because we all have next. What's coming next will impact all of us. So I hope that answers the question, but storytelling in a shell is critical to communal healing.
Oh, that was a fantastic answer. I think we all gained a lot from that. Ms. Nelson, I think you got a pretty hard question coming up here. We talked about past, we've talked about remembrance so far, but one of the things that we have is there is a common thread of grief throughout Black celebrations. Do Black celebrations have to be tied to grief, or is that just a byproduct of our history?
This is a hard question to answer because I feel like when celebrations are tied to grief, they grief isn't centered in such a way that it's like trying to bring the celebration down rather than it's trying to give that grief a new name. Similarly to, again, Dr. Lumumba, what she said with storytelling and how, well, you can't truly heal unless that story is told. How could these Black celebrations truly celebrate if the grief that is tied to them isn't at least given a new name? And once it is given that new name, is it still grief? And will it always be tied to those celebrations? I don't know. I feel like in a vacuum, Black celebrations don't have to be tied to grief, and it's not a permanent thing. But as it stands now, if I don't give that grief a name and if I don't bring it up when I can, then it won't be addressed as it should and it will always be there.
So recognizing that grief helps us to heal.
Yes, I think that you can't possibly heal an emotional wound without crying it out first.
Okay. John?
Joshua, I really prepared for that question. I prepared. Is that all of our celebrations are not tied to grief. It is part of the way the national media wants to portray and deal with us. They want to, we built institutions, we shape global centers, we've created political movements, we celebrate all success all the time. But often when we are dealt with by the media, we're dealt with it on the terms of slavery, on segregation, on poverty and crime and violence. That's the way that they deal with us. That is the way that they seek to define us. It's up to us to change that narrative. Juneteenth is an opportunity to do that. Joshua, I have a whole lot more, but I'm going to respect the group here, okay? Thank you.
Okay, John.
Can I just jump in? Can I jump in as well, Joshua? I'm just going to take the lead from take my lead from Dr. Gilleylen, and I'll just shortly add, right? I don't want to vilify grief either. It is part of the human condition and human experience. And the only reason celebrations matter is because there was grief, right? The reason we celebrate birthdays is because we know about death. The reason that we grieve so hard is you don't grieve something that you haven't loved. And so I think grief can be a gift too, a reminder to practice gratitude, a reminder of where you've been, and not to say that our holidays are about grief. I completely agree with Dr. Gilleylen, but I also don't want us to fail to acknowledge the gift of grief, that we've been somewhere painful and we've moved through and out of that pain. I think that experience is valuable as well. And it also underscores our humanity. We feel pain too, but it hasn't destroyed us.
Okay. Dr. Kersen, what kind of economic impact do events like Juneteenth have on the community?
Well, I can't give you specifics about Jackson, but I'm sure there is going to be a positive result of this Juneteenth and all the other Juneteenths that have passed. I think these type of events have positive effect. I'm thinking celebrations of any sort, have positive effects, economic effects on a community. So who do they, when you're looking at these economic things, who benefits is one of the questions I would be asking. Who benefits from these economic impacts? And in this case, this is where some of us have been hinting at it, where African Americans can be the captains of the ship and kind of guide and direct where some of these economic streams can come to, especially in this community, about Juneteenth and how to use it to better Jackson and the metro area. And also, I think, along with economic stuff, one of the issues we have is how the surrounding metro communities want to isolate themselves from Jackson. And in terms of economic prosperity and bringing it back into Jackson, I think Juneteenth would be, something to look at to do that, because there are sizable African American populations in Clinton, in Madison, and other places, and having Juneteenth celebrations, the capital of that be in Jackson, would be a smart move if we were to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Kersen. All right, Dr. Lumumba, and this kind of ties back into what you were just going and talking about. How do events like Juneteenth balance traumatic histories with self-care?
Repeat the question one more time, Josh.
How do events like Juneteenth balance traumatic histories with self-care?
Oh, right. Yeah, it does connect. I should have just waited my turn, right? So thank you. But when we think about, thank you so much. So balancing traumatic history with self-care, I think that, one needs the other. And I think could benefit from being reminded that remembering and healing are not mutually exclusive, right? You have to remember in order to heal. And so Juneteenth gives us the opportunity, not only as a community, to be reminded of and educated on this history, but to share out that knowledge and understanding, so that there is this opportunity to share in collective growth and making strides towards liberation. Freedom is a collective project. It is a group project. You cannot achieve freedom or liberation in isolation. And so the part of that is caring for self as well. Taking care of yourself when everything else around you is lacking is going to dissipate. It's not going to be a lasting impact on the care that you are exhibiting for yourself. And so trauma reminds us that we have a story, but it doesn't have to stop there. It opens up the floodgates for the possibility of healing. Again, using that analogy about seeing a physician or a healer about an injury, you have to tell the story so that they can then say, I need to know what you've been doing so that I can diagnose this pain so you can get better. And so acknowledging what our traumas are and our triggers and the things that have impacted perhaps our lack, that's really the first step to knowing what I need to take care of self in order to be in a better position to take care of community. These things work together. They work in tandem. They are hand in hand. Remembering is at the epicenter of Juneteenth. And when we remember, that opens the numerous possibilities for healing in my mind.
Thank you, Dr. Lumumba. This one goes to the entire panel. This is an open question. Is Juneteenth a political event?
I'll try that, Joshua. Yes and no. Juneteenth unto itself is not a political event, but Juneteenth can be a tool for a political event. In other words, Juneteenth itself is a celebration. It's a triumph. It's a triumph over all of the things that happened to us, like a freedom, like of the franchise, the right to vote, all of these kinds of things we have prevailed over, but not completely, not entirely, because that struggle continues. And Juneteenth offers the opportunity for us to revisit what we've been through, where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go. The challenge, we've been challenged. A gauntlet has been laid down for us for the next iteration of what the struggle for equality and civil rights is going to look like. Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to enjoy where we've been, the triumph of coming out of that. But what will make it political, and I think I'm doing that right now, is as we start to prepare for what we expect November 2026. So it doesn't unto itself, no, it's not political, but it can be used as a political tool. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Does anybody else have a different take?
I do actually. I feel like Juneteenth is inherently political and then taken to become a celebration. It's my understanding that Juneteenth is celebrated because when slaves were supposed to be freed, there were still plenty of plantations who refused to acknowledge it and wouldn't let them truly become free. And Juneteenth is supposed to be the day that the very last plantation uh, did not have slaves anymore. And if politics is the decision of who gets what, and the what in this case is freedom, a life to live of your own accord, then anything that Juneteenth stands for is political. Everything that we do from this point forward uh, to make sure that we keep this freedom and then uh, push it forward into not just freedom, but also equality is political. And then celebrating the fact that we do have the opportunity to do this is where I feel like it isn't as political anymore.
Very well said. Very powerful words. Do you have any other comments?
I think I would just add, I agree with my fellow panelists. It's a yes and no. And Ms. Nelson, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I'm not a political scientist. I see Dr. Mangum is here, so hopefully I define the terminology accurately. But Ms. Nelson said it. Political science is the study of who gets what and why, very simply. That's how it's been explained to me. And so this it's a human event first. Juneteenth is a human event. It is a human holiday. However, it should motivate what we know from that story, should motivate how we approach politics. Who gets what, why, there's equity and dignity and humanity considered when these distributions of all of these different rights happen. And so it's a human event. It's a human holiday with political implications, because we're talking about freedom, and freedom is inherent when we discuss politics. And political shouldn't be a dirty word. It really should be this equal distribution of rights and liberties as it's written into the Constitution and the fabric of this space.
Joshua, could I add something?
Sure thing.
You know, let's not, I don't want to lose the fact of the effort to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. The very fact that it's a federal holiday should mean that the nation celebrate with us. If we make it entirely a political, put it in a political status all the time, then will it cease to be a national holiday only being celebrated by a unique group? The fact or the effort to make it a federal holiday makes it a holiday, or should make it a holiday that is celebrated by all of us. Does politicalization of the holiday somehow becomes a barrier if it's totally political? That's sort of my question.
That is a good question. I guess what we really have to look at is whether or not the other holidays are considered political. Is the 4th of July political? Is Thanksgiving political? If we look at the state of politics in the nation, the concept of politics, it is the government and it is the governing of the people and the will of the people. So holidays act as expressions and remembrance in those things. But I mean, the argument whether or not it's political or not really comes down into how we as people feel about it. I think it is a part of it that there is always going to be a political element to it. Um, but this actually leads us into our next question, which I should probably
May
get
I
to.
say something before that?
Yes, you can, Dr. Kersen.
I'm looking at how the administration regards Juneteenth, to answer your question, from going at it from another direction. And they're quite hostile to it. They've taken it off the national park entries list of um, uh, free days to come in to the national parks. Federal agencies are not to observe it. Uh, the current president has called it he criticized it along with some other holidays as non-working holidays, and I guess meaning frivolous. And then, of course, there's a patchwork of states that have done what they could to prevent any observance of it as well. So, looking at the opposition, they do regard it as a political uh, uh, observation, Juneteenth.
Well, this leads me into my next question, which may be a little bit controversial. Is Juneteenth just for Black America? And this is an open question.
I really wanted to answer this question. I think absolutely not. Um, Basically, in America, there is a domino effect for every marginalized community, right? If Black people can't take a step forward, then gay people can't take a step forward, then women can't take a step forward, and so on. And if people of every community can't come together to celebrate and to be happy that a large, huge step was taken forward in America that ultimately allowed people to be people and not objects or animals, then we will be able to, as a community, have that same energy for each separate issue, and everyone will be able to live, and this is very ideally, but everyone will be able to live in a world where they feel accepted and free to be themselves. And I feel like if we tie it off to say, oh, only Blacks should care about it, then it will be not a tool to actually bring forth the freedom that we do want.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
You know, Joshua, that's her point is very well taken. And part of it, when I'm listening to her talk, I can see all the stories, and go back to storytelling, Dr. Lumumba, all the stories that I've heard. The struggle for freedom and for democracy hasn't been solely for enslaved people. And as we looked at our struggle, to live up to the ideals of this country, we've had some partners that were not enslaved. I look at almost every HBCU in this country was somehow founded through white churches. You look at Martin Luther King's movement, and he was the face, but operationally behind him were people of other color. So King said one is, and I'm probably not going to quote this perfectly, but it goes along the line of rights denied of one group or rights denied for all of us. And so I don't see Juneteenth as being solely a Black holiday, because it was a multiracial, denominational movement that ignited, and their energy carried us to 1964. So I agree with Ms. Nelson. I think her comments were well reasoned. So absolutely.
Dr. Lumumba?
Yeah, I'll just expand on the knowledge that my co-panelists have shared, is that while it's obvious that it's drawn from the experience of Black people in this country, the lessons from it are for everyone, right? There is something to learn, something to pull from what happened at Juneteenth, why it existed. Any nation that is serious and committed to freedom must also be willing to examine how freedom has been denied, how it's been delayed, how it's been expanded, how it's been contested. You cannot profess to be serious about the project of freedom and exclude these histories. So that's one. But I also want to think about something that I don't think dominantly is talked about right across media and dominant narratives, is that the institution of chattel slavery in this country impacted enslaved people the most, but it impacted so many other communities negatively. So if we just use, I know we're talking about Juneteenth and what happened in Texas, but let's use Mississippi history for a moment and acknowledge that about 11% of the white population could afford to own land and people at the dawn of the Civil War. 11%. So that means that there's 89% of the white population in Mississippi living in abject poverty with no access to employment, no access to any sort of political power. I mean, imagine how that impacted and continues to impact generations of their descendants. And so this deleterious project of enslavement in this country had an impact that was magnitudes. It impacted all of these different communities. Conversely, the freedom from that had a benefit for more communities than we tend to acknowledge, right? And so while that narrative gets skewed and while it's not necessarily talked about, I think we need to continue to push that this freedom project is collective, that this history is shared, and that it had an impact on all of our ancestors in this space. Every single one of them. There's a ripple effect to being disenfranchised and being set free. Both of those ripple throughout your own community and the communities that surround yours. And so to say that, there is no way that this could only or should only be for Black America. We should all be celebrating that people were able to realize their liberation dreams, because what does that mean for our possibilities if we are not a part of that community? We should all be a part of acknowledging this sordid truth, because we don't want to go back there for any community. And so it's out of the Black experience. I'm very proud of that, but we would be fooling ourselves to believe that it only impacted enslaved people, that it only impacts Black community. That's just a short-sighted, I think, perception on what this holiday truly means and represents.
One of the things that I'm encouraged by, enthusiastically encouraged by, is the way that I saw the state of Minnesota perform and react to what was happening in their states this past winter. I didn't believe until that moment that such energy and devotion and belief in the ideals of democracy was that embedded in any of us. What we saw in Minnesota was collective. It was a collective energy of a whole state reacting to what was happening to a very, very small majority of individuals in the state. I think it was absolutely outstanding, absolutely encouraging. And Ms. Nelson, I think it was an excellent example of the situation that you described.
Dr. Kersen?
Howard Zinn, People's History of U.S. is a story basically of elites alienating African Americans against marginalized whites, and if what would happen if they both had a shared sense that they're all getting exploited. That would have, can you imagine the history? Because like Dr. Lumumba brought up, there were lots of places in Mississippi and Arkansas, Ozarks come to mind, the mountainous areas, which they were hostile to the Confederacy. It wasn't uniform, but because of the power of the plantation, they drug everyone into the war that another needless war, which we've been in a lot of those. But I think for people who find this theme interesting and sad, tragic, Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States is a book they must get. It reads well, and it continually talks about, here's another example where elites were able to make poor whites rail against another marginalized group about some issue, while all along they're doing something to exploit everybody.
We have a comment coming from our comment section from Dr. Phyllis Lewis Hale. Many feel that slavery changed forms rather than completely ending. Many enslaved people entered systems like sharecropping and debt peonage. Convict leasing and segregation and disenfranchisement continue to this day. And that brings me to my next question. What does community healing look like? And this one goes for Dr. Kersen.
A lady named Mindy Full wrote a book called Root Shock. And root shock, the basic premise is that when you pull a tree or a plant out from its roots, it will die. And so what Juneteenth allows, and many of you brought this up in terms of legacy, heirloom, all these things, that communities really need that heritage, those roots to be able to have psychological and social well-being. And when they don't have it, all sorts of cascading negative effects happen. And so what I would say is we continually need to have where we can counter this root shock in the various ways that it occurs. Does that get to your question? I think I kind of wandered off a little bit.
It does. It touches on it. Looking at community healing, what does community healing overall look like? How do we recognize and how do we begin to remedy the issues of the past, which still affect us?
So, but the remedy for that is preventing root shock. And for instance, whenever, and I know it's occurring right now, it's kind of interesting, but in root shock, Full of mentions highways and bypasses and things like that as obstacles that separate groups of people, that whenever a community was deemed blighted or not wanted to, they didn't want to keep up with it, they would call it blighted and take it over, urban renewal and these types of things. So right now we have that with data centers. And so I think more than ever, we need to value our community and other communities as well and talk about what it is we value. Is it data from ChatGPT, or is it actual people that we care about, and the actual heritage and the past that we should celebrate? And so preventing root shock wherever we can, I think, is a remedy to that.
Thank you, Dr. Kersen. Sure thing, John.
Well, I'm a old engineer, and I want to see something physical. I need, when we talk about what it looks like, and part of that, it gets to be, and I think I've heard this earlier today from the panel, it begins with telling the truth. When we look at what's happening in our communities, and we look at communities across the country, when we look at political boundaries that are administered by people of color, we see lack of resources. We see our government not stepping up and sharing the resources that come into a state equally. We have a tendency to see, I think we see this globally, but we see it physically in our communities, the qualities of our roads, the amount of development. And it all begins with telling the truth. And until we can get to a point that we can tell the truth, we can't heal. And those individuals with power and with the resources, they are denying us. They actually, um, the mentality is that we don't deserve what other communities deserve because we haven't earned it, or we are not worthy. Until we can start telling the truth that we're all about our humanity, that we're all citizens in a collective, and we should share the benefits of this country, which may or may not sound communist, not equally, but do we have to have so many people without healthcare insurance? Do we have to have so many people that have no place to live? It hurts me every time I drive under that viaduct in Jackson to see homeless persons sitting there. That should hurt someone. We should see less homeless. There are measurable, visible opportunities for communal healing. And it begins with those that are the most resourced, those that have benefited the most from the way our system is organized and operate. It begins with telling the truth.
Well, that leads us to our most difficult question of the day, which I will open up to anyone. How can America rectify its past of social injustice with its mission of freedom and democracy? That one scared y'all, didn't it?
Well, I'm going to go first because I'm sure I have the least nuanced answer. I think that it can't. I think that you can't heal a wound that's still infected. You have to rid yourself of the infection first. We're still dealing with a vast amount of issues within our social justice. I mean, like I think it was Dr. Kersen who was speaking about the people in Minneapolis. Excuse me, but the woman who got shot in bold daylight because she had the gall to use her freedom of speech against ICE. I feel like America can't rectify that. I was given the opportunity to work on a reparations paper my last year, and I had a really hard time deciding what I truly thought reparations could be because I don't think that it's possible, especially not while the issue is still ongoing. I don't think that America should worry about rectifying their past. I think that instead it should be worried about not making the past happen once again. That is what I'm more scared about right now.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
I'll jump in and say, I would build off of where Dr. Gilleylen took us with truth, right? So if we're talking about just acknowledging that a thing has been a thing, that is the first necessary step to moving forward. I don't see healing as a destination. It is an ongoing process. If we continue with the analogy of physical health, right? We become survivors of major illnesses from going through treatment, but treatments and lifestyle changes don't stop. Once you've gotten that clean bill of health, you continue to go through the process of maintaining that health. And one, you got to be truthful about how we got to that space. You've got to tell the truth. This, healing is not forgetting. So let's pretend that never happened and move forward. None of us would continue a relationship with a friend or a partner if they wronged us and said, you know what, let's just act like that never happened and then move forward. That's not a healthy relationship. We don't want that from the people that we're in relationship with. And we are in relationship with this nation. So we don't want to be told that a thing that we know is real is not real. We don't want to be the victims of gaslighting. We want acknowledgement and truth so that then we can strategize prioritize how we move forward. Not saying that those things never happened and they're not a part of our DNA, but we are not going back to that diet. We're not going back to that lifestyle because we want to get to a place where we are in a more healthy state. I think, again, a democracy that is mature is willing to struggle with its past and its mistakes. That's how we mature as human beings, right? We learn from the things that we've erred on. We've learned from the things that we have done that we wish we hadn't done. It doesn't mean they didn't happen. But if we are willing to move forward, then we must be determined to acknowledge those things and not repeat them. And so for me, rectifying it is tell the truth about it. And then let's tell the truth about what will get us into a more healthy state. We'll never be perfect. No community or democracy will ever be perfect. But a more perfect union looks like one who knows that it's never been perfect, but striving every day to be more equitable and more democratic and more in line with the interests of its populace. That to me is how you strive to make a thing right. I mean, we can use Germany as an example. There are no Nazi monuments in Germany. It is actually illegal to erect them, and you won't find them when you're there. They teach the history of what happened in Nazi Germany to kindergartners because they don't want to repeat that. They're not saying that that's not who they were at one point, but they are determined for that not to be who they are now and who they will become. And not that that's a perfect nation at this point, but those sorts of strides are what, an acknowledgement of truth and circumstance are what lead to a better, more healed state.
I have a fear, Joshua, if I may.
Sure thing, John.
I have a fear. I'm going to tell you what my fear is. There are those of us, and I'm much older than all you guys, okay? Probably some of you put together, okay? I have a fear that there are those of us that have a definition of what this country is supposed to be, democracy and freedom of speech and so forth. That can be lost in a generation because we were taught what those things were and we desired those things. What if what we have stay in existence for more than 10 years and all of a sudden that you have a generation of individuals who's lost that definition, who've not experienced what that definition of what this country could be. They wouldn't have had the experiences that we had. So I'm afraid that democracy as we know it has a term limit. I think that the longer this situation that we're in exists, the more dangerous it becomes to what we thought and believed this country to be. So that's a fear of mine. That's a fear of mine, is that if this isn't fixed sooner than later, we'll probably lose it all. I think Benjamin Franklin said, you have a republic if you can keep it. And that rings no more true today than I've ever heard in my lifetime, and I'm 75 years old. So thank you guys for listening to me.
Thank you. We have another comment from the viewers. From Dr. Gloria Dansby Giles, I think that we not only need to tell the truth, but we must demand and put into place practices that do not allow the perpetrators to continue to harm others. We must tell the truth and do no harm. Thank you. We're going to open it up the next 5 minutes for questions. We're actually running over right now, but going to open up for any questions from our viewers. Going to give you a second to think of something. Okay. Well, nothing in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised. So I want to thank everybody for coming out today. It is now 12:59, so we are exactly on time then. Want to thank our illustrious panel, Dr. Lumumba, Dr. Kersen, Dr. Gilleylen, and future Dr. Future Dr. Nelson. And we want to thank all of our viewers for coming out and spending the time with us. This has been a very fantastic conversation today. And I want to thank everyone from the Institute for Social Sciences and Humanities for hosting us today. Dr. McNeil, have you got anything that you want to chime in on?
Well, again, I apologize for my camera not working. I've tried it. I don't know what's going on with it. But again, I want to echo what Josh just said. This has been a dynamic discussion. And you know me, I would like for it to go on and on and on and on and on. And I especially with I'm glad that we was able to bring the student on. And when I saw the student, it reminded me of a young Kenya Hudson who last year we lost her around this time. And so everything we're doing these next couple of days will be in honor of Kenya. I think that more, I think that the whole campus, the high school students, and especially college students should have heard this presentation today. So we have it recorded, and we will begin to upload these recordings to our classes because it is very important. You know, I heard sociology, I heard political science, psychology. I mean, you heard all of the fields, English, which is storytelling, and you just in history. It's just remarkable how, I mean, what greatness that we have here at Jackson State and amongst our, faculty and students. So it does my heart great, again, that we can continue to hold these type of panels and share our knowledge, our scholarship, and what to become from our students, soon to be doctor. And Dr. Gilleylen, you know, when you come on, I said, Josh, you got to get Johnny, and Dr. Lumumba and all. Dr. Kersen, thank you for being a lone soldier here. But you, and thank you, and I appreciate all of you. And again, thank you, Josh. Great questions. Thank you, our viewers, and we'll see you tomorrow at the annual picnic. Dr. McDaniel, Provost, thank you for sharing the information. Thank you for attending as well. Thanks again. Thank you.
And thanks again to everyone. And I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you.